At first, it looked like just another family argument. A phone camera shaking, voices raised, tension thick in the air. But nothing about that video felt normal, because the man holding the knife wasn't a stranger. He was a doctor, a father, a husband, and the person filming was a 19-year-old son watching everything fall apart in real time. One by one, the tires on his truck were slashed. Deliberately, slowly, almost calmly. A baby nearby. And when he asked why, the response was cold. It's called being the parent. At the time, it seemed like a disturbing moment, but nothing more. No one knew that years later, that same video would become a chilling piece of evidence tied to something far darker. Because 3 of the people connected to that moment would end up dead. From the outside, this family looked like something out of a picture-perfect life. A respected physician, a devoted wife, beautiful children, the kind of family people admire, the kind you assume is safe. But appearances can lie, and sometimes they hide something dangerous. Her name was Charity, and before she became a headline, before her name was tied to tragedy, she was simply a mother, 40 years old, raised in Arkansas, in a place where neighbors knew each other, where people believed in community. She had a sense of humor, a strong faith, and a deep love for her children, especially her oldest son, John. To him, she wasn't just his mom. She was his safe place. But over time, that safety started to disappear. John watched something change. Slowly, quietly. The kind of change you don't notice all at once. Until it's too late. The laughter became less frequent. The stress became constant. And the man his mother married started to feel less like family and more like a threat. In 2015, Charity married Dr. Randall Bice. On paper, everything made sense. He was established, educated, trusted by the community. A family medicine doctor with years of experience. The kind of man patients rely on. The kind of man people respect. But behind closed doors, that version of him didn't always exist. According to Charity's family, the marriage wasn't stable. It wasn't safe. They describe years filled with control, fear, and violence. Not rumors. Not assumptions. Things Charity herself had spoken about. Things her son had witnessed. Things that were eventually documented. And that video from 2020, that wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time the outside world got a glimpse. In the footage, you don't just see anger. You see control. The way Randall moves. The way he speaks. The way he ignores the fear in his own son's voice. It's not chaotic. It's calculated. And that's what makes it unsettling. Because chaos can be impulsive. But control is intentional. After that incident, there were consequences. But not the kind that stop someone. Randall pleaded no contest to misdemeanor criminal mischief. The result? A suspended sentence. No jail time. No real accountability. Life moved on. At least on the surface. But inside the home, things didn't get better. They escalated. For John, fear became normal. Not sudden fear, but the kind that builds over time. The kind that sits in your chest. The kind that makes you constantly aware of what might happen next. And for Charity, that fear became something else. A realization that she might not be safe at all. Years passed, and what started as tension turned into something much darker. By early 2025, everything was on the edge. The kind of edge where one moment changes everything. And that moment came on February 16th. It didn't happen in secret. It didn't happen quietly. It happened in front of children. That night, Randall put his hands around Charity's throat. And he didn't hide it. Their 6-year-old twins were there, watching. A boy and a girl, seeing something no child should ever see. Their father choking their mother. That moment changed everything. Because this time, it couldn't be explained away. It couldn't be minimized. It couldn't be ignored. Police were called. Randall was arrested. And the charges were serious. Aggravated assault, domestic battery, child endangerment. For the first time, it looked like the system was finally taking it seriously. But what happened next would become one of the most critical turning points in this entire case. Because moments like this, they don't just define what happened, they define what should have happened next. And in Charity's case, what didn't happen may have cost her everything. The most dangerous part of this story is not what happened at the end. It's everything that happened before it. The warnings, the reports, the moments where this could have been stopped. Because Charity didn't stay silent. She tried to get help, and she was very clear about what she was afraid of. After the February 16th attack, everything changed for her. Not just emotionally, but mentally. Because when someone puts their hands around your throat, that's not just violence. That's a message. And Charity understood it. She knew she couldn't stay. So she did what many victims are told to do. She took action. In March 2025, she filed for divorce. Not quietly, not uncertainly. She wanted out. And more importantly, she wanted her children safe. But leaving isn't simple, especially when the person you're leaving still has power. Charity didn't just file paperwork. She built a case, step by step, carefully, documenting everything, because she knew, if she didn't prove it, no one would believe how serious it really was. In April 2025, she reached out to the Arkansas State Medical Board. This wasn't just a complaint. It was a warning. She told them her children had been interviewed at a child advocacy center. She explained that law enforcement had been involved. She made it clear. This wasn't speculation. This was real. And think about that for a second. A woman is reporting that her husband, a licensed doctor, is being investigated in connection with child abuse concerns. That should stop everything. That should trigger urgency. That should raise alarms. But it didn't. Instead of slowing him down, life continued. His medical license stayed active. His career remained untouched. And the system that was supposed to protect families moved slowly. But Charity didn't stop there. She went higher. She went directly to someone with influence, a state senator. She sat in his office, face to face, and told him something chilling. She said she was afraid for her life. Not worried, not uncomfortable, afraid. That's not a casual statement. That's not exaggeration. That's someone recognizing danger in its clearest form. And after her death, that conversation was confirmed, meaning she wasn't just speaking emotionally. She was documenting fear in real time. But even with all of that, things didn't move the way they should have. Months passed, and instead of stronger consequences, the situation took a turn that would shock anyone following this case. In October 2025, Randall went to court, and the charges against him were reduced. The aggravated assault charge? Gone. The child endangerment charges? The ones that existed because children witnessed the violence? Gone. What remained was a single misdemeanor. Third-degree domestic battery. That's it. No prison. No felony record. Minimal fines. A suspended sentence. He walked out of court, free. And that moment may have been one of the most dangerous outcomes possible, because it didn't just remove consequences. It sent a message that what happened wasn't severe enough. For Charity, that must have been devastating, because everything she had done, all the reporting, all the effort, had led to this. And this is where her behavior changes in a way that feels haunting in hindsight. She started speaking out, publicly, carefully, but clearly. In August 2025, before the case was even finalized, she shared something online, an article. The headline was direct. If a partner has ever strangled you, they will likely kill you. That wasn't random. That wasn't casual. That was intentional. Because statistically, when strangulation happens in a relationship, the risk of murder increases dramatically. Charity knew that, and she wanted others to see it too. It wasn't just information. It was a warning. But the question is, who was she warning? The public, or the system that had already failed her? Because by that point, it was becoming clear she wasn't being protected. And still, she kept going. She continued the divorce. She fought for custody. She kept pushing forward. Because when you're a parent, you don't stop, even when the system does. And that brings us to the moment that changed everything. December 2nd, 2025. After months of legal battles, court hearings, and documented abuse, Charity stood in court for what should have been a turning point. This was about custody, about safety, about deciding where her children would live, and who they would be protected from. She had evidence. She had reports. She had history. She had done everything right. And then the decision came. The judge granted joint custody, meaning the man she had reported, the man who had been arrested, the man she said she feared, still had legal access to her children. In one moment, everything she had fought for collapsed. Imagine that, walking out of a courtroom, knowing that the system had just tied you, even closer, to the person you were trying to escape. That was December 2nd. The next day, December 3rd, a welfare check was requested. Less than 24 hours later. And when deputies arrived, something was wrong. Inside the home, they found 3 bodies. Charity and her 2 young children, all with gunshot wounds. Just one day, that's all it took. One court decision, and less than 24 hours later, a crime scene. And this is where the story shifts again, because now, it's no longer about warning signs. It's about what happened after. Authorities confirmed an active investigation. Search warrants were executed. Evidence was collected. And Randall, he was cooperating. No immediate arrest. No official suspect announcement. His attorney released a statement. He denied any involvement. Legally, he is innocent until proven guilty. But for Charity's family, this wasn't about legal language. It was about loss, shock, anger. Her father described the grief as overwhelming, unpredictable. One moment crying, the next moment furious. And her son, John, said something that stayed with people. He said his mother would have fought back, that she wouldn't have gone quietly. And that might explain something disturbing. Why she was reportedly shot more than once. Because even at the end, she didn't stop fighting. But what happened next would take this case in an even darker direction. Because just days later, something was discovered that didn't make sense. Something that suggested this wasn't just about what happened inside the house. It was about what someone did after. 3 days after the murders, someone was going through a dumpster, not looking for evidence, not expecting anything unusual, just another ordinary moment, until it wasn't. Inside a large black garbage bag, there were photographs, family photos, smiling faces, memories frozen in time. There were children's drawings, schoolwork, handwritten notes, and then something even more personal, a gold necklace, engraved with the names of the twins. These weren't random items. These were pieces of a life, the kind of things people protect, the kind of things a mother keeps forever. But someone had thrown them away. At first, the woman who found the bag didn't realize what she was looking at. But the next morning, after seeing news reports about the murders, it clicked. She immediately contacted police, turned everything over, showed them exactly where she found it. And now, the case had a new question. Who put those items in the dumpster? And why? Because this wasn't an accident. You don't accidentally throw away asterisk family portraits, asterisk children's memories, asterisk personal documents, asterisk jewelry with names engraved. This was deliberate, and that makes it disturbing, because it suggests something else entirely. Not just violence, but cleanup. An attempt to remove something, to erase something, to disconnect what happened from the people it happened to. Investigators confirmed they were looking into it, trying to determine who placed the bag there and when. But for Charity's family, this discovery felt wrong on a deeper level. Her son, John, even met the woman who found the items. He was grateful, relieved someone had come forward. But when he brought it up to investigators, the response unsettled him. Instead of reassurance, he says he was asked, "How did you find out?" Not, "Thank you." Not, "We're investigating." Just that. And for many people following the case, that moment raised concerns. Because when evidence surfaces, the focus should be on what it reveals, not how it was discovered. And what it revealed was chilling. Someone had handled those belongings, collected them, bagged them, transported them, and thrown them away. That takes time. That takes intent. And intent matters. But just when this case already felt heavy, another detail surfaced. One that changed everything. Because Charity wasn't the only woman connected to Randall, who died from a gunshot wound. Years earlier, there was another wife. Her name was Shauna. She was 34 years old, a registered nurse, still building her life. In 2012, police were called to the home she shared with Randall. When they arrived, he answered the door and told them something simple, something final. He said she had killed herself. Inside the home, they found her in the bedroom, dead, a gunshot wound to the forehead. The case was ruled a suicide. But not everyone believed that, because there were details that didn't sit right. According to reports, there were signs of disturbance inside the home. Furniture out of place, objects scattered. Not what you typically expect in a clean, controlled scene. Shauna's family questioned it then, and years later, they're still questioning it now. Because when you look at the bigger picture, it becomes impossible to ignore. 2 wives, 2 gunshot deaths, 13 years apart, and the same man connected to both. Now, to be clear, Randall has never been charged in connection with Shauna's death. He has never been officially named a suspect. But when patterns begin to form, people notice. And investigators, they don't ignore patterns. In fact, that case was reopened in 2021, which means something about it was worth taking another look at. But what exactly was found has never been fully made public. And that uncertainty leaves space for questions. Unanswered ones. Because there's one detail that makes this even more unsettling. According to reports, Charity once told her father something about Shauna's death. Not that she was involved, not that she caused it, but that she knew who did. That statement was later clarified, but it still lingers. Because what does that mean? Was it fear, suspicion, knowledge? No one knows for sure. But when you place that detail next to everything else, it becomes impossible to ignore the possibility that Charity was connecting dots. Dots that no one else was fully seeing. Or maybe, dots that no one was acting on. And that's what makes this part of the story so uncomfortable. Because if there was a pattern, it wasn't hidden. It was there, in records, in reports, in conversations. But patterns don't stop anything, unless someone steps in. And in this case, no one did. But the deeper investigators looked, the more questions started to surface. Because beyond the deaths, there was a history, a documented one. Records from the Arkansas State Medical Board revealed something significant. An 88-page file. Not a complaint, not a minor issue. 88 pages. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a timeline. A record of behavior. The earliest issue dates back to 2018. Randall had prescribed controlled narcotics to his own wife. In medicine, that's a serious violation. These are powerful drugs, strictly regulated, and prescribing them to immediate family members breaks ethical boundaries. He apologized, promised it wouldn't happen again, and the board accepted it. No major consequences. Years later, after the 2025 choking incident, Charity contacted the board herself. She told them everything. About the abuse, about the investigations involving her children, about the danger. She wasn't vague. She was direct. And still, nothing changed. Even after Randall pleaded guilty to domestic battery, the board took no meaningful action. His license remained active. He could still practice medicine, still see patients, still live his life, as if nothing had fundamentally changed. And when you step back and look at all of this, it becomes overwhelming. The video, the arrest, the warnings, the reduced charges, the custody decision, the prior death, the discarded belongings. Individually, each one raises concern. Together, they form something much harder to ignore. A pattern of warning signs that kept being missed. Or worse, overlooked. And now, 3 people are gone. Which leads to the question no one can avoid. How many warning signs does it take before someone steps in? Because by the time everything came together, it was already too late. By the time investigators began putting everything together, it was already too late. 3 lives were gone, a mother, and 2 children who never got the chance to grow up. But what made this case different, what made it stay with people, wasn't just the tragedy. It was the fact that almost every step leading up to it had been documented. This wasn't a mystery that appeared out of nowhere. It was a timeline, a sequence, a chain of warnings that stretched back years. And at nearly every point, there was an opportunity to intervene. Charity reported the abuse. She filed charges. She documented everything. She went to court. She asked for help. She spoke to officials. She made her fear known. She didn't stay silent. And that's what makes this case so difficult to process. Because when someone does everything right, and the outcome is still the same, it forces a question no one is comfortable answering. What else was she supposed to do? The system had records. Law enforcement had reports. The courts had evidence. The medical board had documentation. And yet, nothing stopped what happened. Charges were reduced. Consequences minimized. Warnings delayed. And in the end, access was still granted. That final decision, joint custody, placed her children directly in a situation she had been trying to escape. Less than 24 hours later, they were gone. There's a statistic that often gets mentioned in cases like this. Across the United States, on average, 3 women are killed every day by a current or former partner. But statistics don't capture moments like this. They don't capture a mother sitting in a courtroom, hoping someone finally understands. They don't capture a child watching something they can't unsee. And they don't capture the feeling of knowing something bad is coming and not being able to stop it. Charity knew. That's what makes this different. She didn't just experience danger. She recognized it. She named it. She warned people about it. And still, it wasn't enough. As of now, the investigation remains open. No arrests have been made. No final conclusions announced. Only questions. Questions her family continues to ask. Her son, John, hasn't stepped away. He's still following the case, still reviewing filings, still speaking publicly. Because for him, this isn't just about answers. It's about making sure his mother's story doesn't disappear. And maybe making sure it doesn't happen again. Her father continues to grieve, describing a loss that doesn't come in waves, but hits constantly. And in the middle of that grief, there's something else. Frustration. Because when warning signs are ignored, it doesn't just lead to tragedy. It creates the feeling that it could have been prevented. And that's what makes this case bigger than one family. Because it forces us to look at the systems meant to protect people and ask whether they're working the way we believe they are, or whether they're reacting only after it's too late. But this story doesn't exist in isolation. Because, sadly, this isn't the first time a family like this has existed, where everything looked perfect until it collapsed. In another case, a man named Anthony Todd lived in a community that looked like something out of a movie. Clean streets, beautiful homes, a place designed to feel safe. From the outside, his life looked stable, successful, normal. A wife, 3 children, a home in a picture-perfect neighborhood. But just like the case we've been following, What people saw on the outside wasn't the full story. Behind the scenes, pressure was building. Financial problems, debt, a life that wasn't as stable as it appeared. And just like before, there were signs. Subtle at first, then harder to ignore. Messages that didn't sound right. Silence where there shouldn't have been silence. Until one day, authorities were called to his home. When they arrived, something felt off immediately. The man who answered the door was shaking. His answers didn't make sense. His behavior didn't match the situation. And then there was the smell. The kind of smell that tells you something is very wrong before you even see it. Inside the home, they found something unimaginable. His entire family dead. Not recently. They had been there 4 weeks, while he continued living in the same house, eating, sleeping, walking around, as if nothing had happened. Just like the case we've been following, there were questions. Why? What pushes someone to that point? And how do warning signs go unnoticed until they turn into something irreversible? In Anthony Todd's case, the evidence was clear. He was convicted, sentenced to life in prison. But even with a conviction, the question remains the same. Could it have been stopped? Because when you look at both cases, you start to see something unsettling. Different people, different lives, different circumstances, but the same pattern. A controlled image on the outside, pressure building underneath, warning signs appearing, then being minimized, until suddenly everything breaks. And when it does, it's too late to fix anything. These stories aren't just about crime. They're about moments. Moments where something could have changed, but didn't. Moments where someone asked for help and didn't get enough of it. Moments where people noticed something felt off, but didn't realize how serious it was. And those moments matter, because sometimes the difference between life and death is whether someone acts in time. So now the question shifts to you, not as a viewer, but as someone listening to this story. If you saw the signs, would you recognize them? If someone told you they were afraid, would you take it seriously? And if the system failed, what responsibility do the people around them have? Because cases like this don't just test laws. They test awareness. They test attention. And they test whether we're willing to see what's uncomfortable before it becomes irreversible. Charity's story, and the story of families like hers, shouldn't just be remembered. They should be understood. Because behind every headline, there are moments where things could have gone differently. And maybe, if those moments are recognized sooner, the ending changes. But for Charity, for her children, that chance never came. So now I'll leave you with this. What would you have done if you were in her position? And more importantly, how many warning signs should it take before someone finally steps in? Because in the next case, the signs were there too. But what happened next was even more disturbing.